The birthday cake sat untouched in the center of the table, 22 candles already burning down into the frosting. My mother didn't look at me. Instead, she slid a plain white envelope across the table. "Open it," she said. I smiled nervously, expecting a card, maybe even the house key she'd promised I could finally have. Instead, a train ticket slipped into my hand. One way. Departure, *6:40 p.m. Destination, 300 miles away. I looked up, waiting for someone to laugh and tell me it was some bizarre joke. Nobody did. My father folded his hands together. "You're 22 now, Malory. It's time you figured life out somewhere else." Across the table, my older brother Ethan leaned back in his chair with a grin he didn't bother hiding. "Guess Mom finally got tired of your little computer hobbies." I stared at the ticket, then back at my parents. "So, you've already decided?" Dad answered before Mom could. "We bought it 4 days ago." The room suddenly felt much smaller. Not because I was being asked to leave. Because they'd planned my exit before my birthday had even arrived. I took a slow breath and quietly asked, "Where am I supposed to go?" Dad shrugged. "That's part of becoming an adult." No one wished me a happy birthday. No one asked whether I had somewhere to stay. The only gift waiting for me was a deadline. The silence after my father's words stretched across the dining room. Outside, rain tapped softly against the kitchen window. Inside, only the candles flickered. My mother finally spoke. "We've already started moving Ethan's things." I frowned. "My room." She nodded without hesitation. "His girlfriend is expecting. They'll need the space." I glanced toward the hallway. The bedroom I'd slept in since elementary school already had empty shelves. Boxes were stacked against the wall. My desk, the one where I'd spent countless nights writing code, was gone. The decision hadn't been made today. It had been unfolding for days, while everyone smiled through birthday preparations. "You couldn't even tell me first," I asked quietly. Dad's expression hardened. "We knew you'd try to argue." I wasn't asking to argue. "No," Ethan interrupted with a laugh. "You would have given us one of your speeches about apps and algorithms and startups." He looked around the table, as though expecting applause. "Maybe someone from the internet will let you sleep on their couch." My parents didn't correct him. That hurt more than his joke. For years, they'd watched me spend long nights in front of my computer. They'd called it an obsession, a phase, a waste of electricity. Every programming competition I'd won had been dismissed as playing games. Every scholarship I'd earned became a sentence about how Ethan just needed more support. Eventually, I'd stopped telling them anything. Not because I had nothing happening. Because nothing I accomplished ever seemed to matter inside this house. I stood without raising my voice. "I'll pack." Dad simply nodded. "Good." 20 minutes later, one suitcase sat beside the front door. I looked around the living room one last time. The family photos on the wall stopped several years earlier. Ethan appeared in nearly every recent frame. I wasn't in any. Mom opened the door. The cool evening air drifted inside. For a moment, I thought one of them might stop me. Instead, Dad said, "Take care of yourself." I picked up my suitcase. "Thank you," I said softly. The three of them looked confused. "For raising me." Then I walked out. No shouting. No slammed doors. No dramatic goodbye. Just the sound of the front door clicking, shut behind me. The train pulled away, just as the sun disappeared below the horizon. I sat beside the window, watching my hometown shrink into the distance. My phone vibrated. One new email. The sender's name made my heartbeat stop. I opened it. There was only one sentence. "The acquisition has officially closed." I read it again. Then, for the first time all day, I smiled. What had just changed? The train arrived just after 9 that evening. Instead of wandering the station looking frightened, I hailed a taxi and asked the driver to take me to a modest business hotel near the city center. The room wasn't luxurious, a clean bed, a desk, and a window overlooking rows of office buildings, but it was quiet. I set my suitcase beside the bed before opening my laptop. The email was still there. The acquisition has officially closed. Below it was another sentence I had been waiting almost 3 years to read. All confidentiality restrictions related to founding ownership are now lifted. For a long moment, I simply stared at the screen. So, it's finally over, I whispered. Not because the company had ended, because I was finally allowed to tell the truth. I closed the laptop again. No, I said to myself. Not yet. Not because I was hiding. Because no explanation would change what had happened that afternoon. 3 years earlier, I'd been 19 when 3 classmates asked if I wanted to help solve a problem no one else seemed interested in. Our idea sounded impossibly ambitious. An AI platform that could automate complex industrial documentation and reduce weeks of manual work to minutes. Everyone laughed. Professors warned us the market was too competitive. Investors rejected us. But every rejection pushed us to improve. While my family believed I was wasting evenings playing with code, I was sitting in rented classrooms, sketching product designs on whiteboards. While Ethan assumed I was chatting online with strangers, I was presenting prototypes over video calls to potential clients. And every time we signed another confidentiality agreement with a corporate partner, another part of my life became impossible to explain. Whenever Mom asked where I'd been, I answered honestly. A project meeting. She'd wave her hand dismissively. As long as you aren't staying out doing something stupid. She never asked another question. The same thing happened again and again. When I won a national programming competition, Dad barely looked up from the television. Computers aren't real work, Malory. When I received a scholarship covering most of my tuition, Ethan laughed. Guess geeks finally found a way to get paid. When I disappeared for weekends to meet investors, my parents assumed I was attending student clubs. They never once asked what we were building. Eventually, I stopped trying to explain. Silence hurt less than being dismissed. The next morning, I walked into the law office handling the acquisition paperwork. One document after another was placed in front of me. Congratulations, Ms. Brooks, the attorney said with a smile. Everything has been finalized. I signed carefully. The final signature released the proceeds tied to part of my ownership. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. A transfer confirmation. The amount displayed on the screen was more money than anyone in my family had ever imagined I could earn. I didn't celebrate. I simply thanked the attorney, walked outside, and stood quietly in the morning sunlight. For years, I'd imagined this moment would feel loud. Instead, it felt peaceful. That afternoon, I met with a real estate agent. I'd like something simple, I said. She blinked. Your budget allows considerably more than simple. I know. After viewing several properties, I chose a spacious apartment overlooking the river. Modern. Quiet. Filled with sunlight. Not because it was expensive. Because it finally felt like somewhere no one could tell me I didn't belong. The purchase was completed before sunset. For the first time in my life, I had a place that was entirely mine. As I unlocked the apartment door, my phone suddenly vibrated. The screen displayed a name I hadn't expected to see so soon. Dad. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. There was no apology. No birthday wishes. Only a long silence. Then his voice came through the speaker. Where exactly are you? Where exactly are you? Dad's voice was flat, controlled, as though nothing unusual had happened the day before. I'm safe, I replied. That's not what I asked. I looked around the empty apartment. The movers had just finished assembling the furniture. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating boxes that contained everything I owned. I don't think my address is important anymore. A pause. Then Dad sighed impatiently. You need to come back. I frowned. I thought you wanted me gone. This isn't about that. Then what is it? The neighbors have started asking questions. Of course they had. People had seen me leave with one suitcase on my birthday. Small neighborhoods notice everything. Dad lowered his voice. People are talking. I closed my eyes. Even now, it wasn't about me. It was about appearances. I won't be coming back, I said calmly. Before he could answer, I ended the call. The following afternoon, my parents attended my aunt's birthday lunch. Nearly every relative was there. Long tables filled the backyard. Children played near the garden, while adults balanced paper plates and traded stories. It didn't take long before someone noticed I was missing. Where's Malory? Aunt Linda asked. She never misses family gatherings. Mom forced a smile. Oh, she's decided to move out. So suddenly. Dad chuckled. She wanted to prove she could make it on her own. Ethan couldn't resist adding his version. Honestly, she'll probably be calling home for money before the week's over. Several relatives laughed politely. One uncle shook his head. Young people today think life is easy. Another cousin added, at least she'll learn some responsibility. No one questioned the story. My absence became entertainment. Across the patio, a television mounted beneath the pergola played a business news channel with the volume turned low. Most guests ignored it. The anchor was discussing technology acquisition. One of the fastest-growing artificial intelligence firms, announced today, has completed a $55 million acquisition. No one at the table paid attention. Except for my cousin, Rachel. She worked in corporate accounting and had a habit of reading every business headline that crossed her screen. As the report continued, photographs of the company's founders flashed behind the anchor. Rachel frowned. Wait. The image disappeared almost immediately. She reached for her phone. Did anyone else see that woman? No one answered. She quickly searched for the article online. Within seconds, it appeared. A headline. A company profile. Several professional photographs. Rachel enlarged one of them. 4 founders stood together in front of their company's logo after announcing the acquisition. She stared at the woman on the far left. Dark hair. Calm smile. Professional blazer. There was no mistaking her. That's... She looked from the phone to my parents. As Malory. Rachel didn't speak right away. She scrolled through the article again, reading every line carefully. The profile didn't describe me as a programmer. It didn't describe me as an employee. Beneath my photograph were the words, co-founder and chief AI architect. Rachel's eyebrows lifted. Another paragraph caught her attention. It described how the 4 founders had built the company while still in university, before expanding it into an international business. She whispered to herself. So that's where she was. Around the table, conversation continued. Ethan was still joking. I give her 4 days before she's back, asking Mom for grocery money. Rachel slowly stood. She walked toward Robert without saying a word. Dad accepted the phone with an impatient smile. What is it? Rachel simply pointed to the screen. He glanced down casually. Then he stopped breathing for a moment. His smile vanished. The color drained from his face as he read the headline again. He looked closer at the photograph, then at Rachel, then back at the screen. Around the table, conversations gradually fell silent. What is this? Nobody answered. Every eye shifted toward the phone in Robert's trembling hands. Robert didn't say another word. He walked away from the table, still staring at Rachel's phone. Behind him, Diane hurried to catch up. "What happened?" she asked. "Why did you just leave?" He handed her the screen. She frowned at the article. Then her eyes widened. "No." She enlarged the photograph until it filled the display. There I was, standing beside my 3 co-founders at the acquisition announcement, smiling in front of the company logo. Below the image was my name. Malory Brooks, co-founder and chief AI architect. Diane read it once. Then again. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Within the hour, the entire family was searching for my name online. Every search brought up something new. Corporate filings listing the founders. Conference photographs from technology summits. Pat registrations with my name attached. Interviews discussing the company's rapid growth. Industry articles praising the engineering team behind the software. Even videos from university innovation competitions surfaced. In one interview, I explained how our platform began as a student project. Robert watched the clip without speaking. Diane covered her mouth. She really built all of this. Rachel nodded quietly. It looks like she's been doing it for years. Years. The word echoed through the room. Years during which they'd assumed I had been wasting my life. Ethan refused to believe it. There has to be another Malory Brooks. Rachel handed him another article. This one includes her university photo. He compared it to an old family picture hanging on the wall. The faces matched perfectly. His confidence disappeared. But she never told us. Robert answered, without looking away from the screen. Maybe. He swallowed hard. Maybe we never listened. The room fell silent. For the first time, no one had a joke. No one laughed. Before anyone could process the discovery, Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and immediately rejected it. A second call came. Then another. His hands began to shake. Dad noticed. Who's calling? No one. Robert reached for the phone. Ethan. It's nothing. The screen lit up again. Final payment notice. Robert looked at his son. What is this? Ethan hesitated. Then the truth finally spilled out. I invested in a distribution business. You said you had investors. I did. Then why are debt collectors calling? Ethan stared at the floor. I guaranteed the loans. Robert frowned. You guaranteed them with what? My savings. He stopped. And yours. The backyard seemed to go completely still. Diane looked from Ethan to Robert. What does that mean? Robert's face turned pale. You used our signatures. I thought the business would succeed. You told us everything was fine. I was going to pay it back. The words came faster now. It just collapsed. The next morning, letters began arriving. Default notices. Loan demands. Legal correspondence. The business had failed months earlier. Ethan had hidden every warning. The guarantees tied directly back to Robert and Diane. Their savings were gone. Their home was now at risk. Robert sat alone in the living room, surrounded by paperwork. His eyes drifted toward the hallway, toward the room that had once belonged to me. He remembered every late night he had complained about the glow beneath my bedroom door. Every weekend he'd mocked my computer obsession. Every time I'd quietly said I had another meeting. Investor meetings. Engineering reviews. Client demonstrations. Patent discussions. Everything suddenly fit together. The coding. The business trips. The confidential phone calls. The legal documents delivered to the house. The weekends away. None of it had been hidden. They had simply chosen not to ask. Late that afternoon, Robert picked up his phone. His finger hovered over my name for several seconds before pressing call. I answered. Hello. His voice sounded older than it had only days before. Malory. He paused. I'd like to see you. I waited. He continued quietly. Not because of the company. Another pause. I need to apologize. I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I said, tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Thank you. The following afternoon, I walked into the same dining room where everything had begun. The birthday decorations were gone. The cake was gone. The house felt strangely empty. Mom stood as I entered, but didn't move closer. Ethan remained seated, staring at the table. Robert walked slowly into the room, carrying something in his hand. Without saying a word, he placed the familiar white envelope in front of me. Inside was the same unused one-way train ticket. For several seconds, no one spoke. I looked down at the train ticket. The corners were slightly bent now, as though it had been handled over and over again. I folded the envelope closed and looked at my father. You kept it. Robert nodded slowly. I couldn't throw it away. His voice cracked. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the moment we stopped treating you like our daughter. The room fell silent again. This time, there was no anger in it. Only the weight of choices that could never be undone. Dad pulled out a chair. Please, sit. I did. Not because I had forgotten what happened. Because I wanted this conversation to end honestly. Robert looked at me for a long moment before asking the question he should have asked years earlier. What were you building? I gave a small, tired smile. An AI company. No one interrupted. When I was 19, 3 classmates and I started working on software that could automate technical documentation for large manufacturers. At first, it was just a university project. I glanced around the table. We kept improving it. Eventually, companies started using it. Investors came in. Then we signed contracts that included strict confidentiality clauses. Diane frowned. So, you couldn't tell us? I couldn't discuss ownership, contracts, or the acquisition. I paused. But I could have told you I was working towards something important. She looked down at her hands. And we never asked. I nodded gently. No. The acquisition closed 4 days before my birthday. That's why I received the email on the train. By then, my shares were already worth millions. Robert closed his eyes. So when we handed you that ticket, I already knew I'd never need financial support. I looked directly at both of them. But that was never what I wanted from you. Neither of them spoke. I wanted you to believe me when I said I was working hard. Diane suddenly covered her face. Her shoulders began to shake. I wrapped that envelope myself. She wiped away tears she could no longer hide. I kept thinking it was the responsible thing to do. I convinced myself we were helping you become independent. She looked up at me. It was your birthday. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. And instead of celebrating you, we sent you away. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything to add. Across the table, Ethan stared at the wood grain beneath his hands. For the first time in his life, he seemed to have no sarcastic remark ready. Finally, he spoke. I made fun of you every chance I got. He swallowed. I thought I was the successful one. His voice trailed off. I'm sorry. No one laughed. No one defended themselves. The truth had already done that work. Robert slid a folder across the table. We're losing the house. I didn't open it. I know. He looked surprised. You know. I've spoken to an attorney. The filings are public. He lowered his head. I hate that the first time I've ever asked you for help is after everything we've done. I took a slow breath. I'll help you find a financial advisor. Robert looked up hopefully. And Ethan? I shook my head. No. The answer came calmly, not angrily. Ethan's debts are the result of his own decisions. If I erase every consequence, he'll never learn from them. Ethan nodded before anyone else could respond. She's right. It was the first time he'd ever agreed with me. I thought someone would always fix my mistakes. He looked toward our parents. I guess that's exactly what happened. Over the following months, professionals negotiated with creditors. Some debts were restructured. Others couldn't be. Eventually, my parents sold the family home to satisfy much of what they owed. It wasn't easy. Watching them leave the house, where we'd all grown up, hurt more than I expected. But reality doesn't disappear simply because it's painful. They moved into a smaller townhouse on the other side of the city. For the first time in decades, they built a life based on what they could actually afford. As for me, I moved into the apartment overlooking the river. The company continued growing under its new ownership, and I remained involved as an advisor for several strategic projects. I invested carefully instead of spending recklessly. I purchased additional properties over time, not to show anyone I was wealthy, but because they were sound investments. More importantly, I established a scholarship fund for university students whose ideas were often dismissed before anyone gave them a chance. Every year, young programmers, engineers, and entrepreneurs received funding simply because someone believed in their potential. The kind of belief I had searched for at home. I also began mentoring founders who reminded me of myself, quiet people with ambitious ideas who didn't always have someone cheering them on. Success, I realized, wasn't measured by how many people admired you. It was measured by how many people you helped believe in themselves. Nearly 8 months later, another envelope arrived in my mailbox. For a brief second, I froze. Then I smiled at the irony. Inside wasn't a ticket. It was a birthday card. No money. No excuses. Just a handwritten note. Malory asterisk. We spent years believing we understood who you were without ever asking you who you wanted to become. We're deeply sorry for the pain we caused. Whether you forgive us or not, we hope you'll always know that we're ashamed of the way we treated you. Happy birthday. Love, Mom and Dad. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't pretending the past never happened. It's deciding that the past won't decide your future. I called them a few days later. Our conversations remained polite. Occasional. Careful. Some things can be repaired. Others can only be accepted. And that's okay. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment overlooking the city, I thought back to that one-way train ticket. The ticket they believed would send me away with nothing. Instead, it carried me toward a life I had already built with my own hands. The greatest mistake my parents ever made wasn't giving me that train ticket. It was never taking the time to see who I had already become.